The UK's aviation crown is cracking. Heathrow, once the unstoppable titan of British air travel, is gasping for air. Delays, cancellations, terminal chaos. It's not just busy, it's bursting. But now, a jaw-dropping proposal has landed on the table. What if the future of UK aviation isn't Heathrow at all, but a floating airport in the middle of the Thames Estuary? Yes, you heard that right. A man-made mega airport built on water. Some call it bold, others call it bonkers. It's an audacious gamble that could revolutionize global travel, or crash and burn spectacularly. So, what exactly is this wild vision? Why do some experts praise it as brilliant, while others warn it's reckless and ruinous? And could this be the lifeline Heathrow desperately needs, or the final nail in its runway? Let's dive into the high-stakes gamble that could reshape the skies over Britain forever. Take a look at this. Over the last decade, few airports have stirred as much controversy or carried as much weight as London Heathrow. In 2024 alone, London's airports handled nearly 295 million passengers, and Heathrow led the pack with a staggering 83.9 million travelers and over 476,000 aircraft movements. That's more than 1,300 takeoffs and landings every single day. Born as a World War II military airfield and launched into commercial service in 1946, Heathrow isn't just the UK's busiest airport. It's a global aviation powerhouse, connecting to over 200 destinations across 80 countries. It's the main base for British Airways, a core hub for Virgin Atlantic, and a critical artery in the world's travel network. But here's the problem. The very airport that once symbolized British connectivity is now crumbling under its own weight. Overcrowded, overloaded, and dangerously close to becoming an international embarrassment. So how did the UK's crown jewel of aviation end up on the edge of collapse? Simple. Too many passengers, too little room. Heathrow is facing a crippling capacity crisis, one that threatens its status as Britain's central aviation hub. With runways operating at 98% capacity and nearly 84 million travelers a year, the airport is bursting at the seams. It was never designed to handle this kind of volume. Yes, London has other airports: Gatwick, Stansted, Luton, City, and Southend, but none match Heathrow's global scale, international reach, or physical footprint. Despite spanning over 12 square kilometers with 5 terminals and 2 runways, even that isn't enough anymore. The result? Chronic delays, overcrowded terminals, infrastructure strain, and the cracks are showing. While the UK's aviation demand is set to grow by 50% by 2050, Heathrow is already maxed out. Why not just add more flights? Because doing so could bury the airport entirely. Labor shortages, outdated terminals, and daily disruptions already strain operations. Increasing flights would only worsen delays, degrade service, and add a crushing 4.4 million tons of CO2 emissions per year, a climate disaster in waiting. Add to that the 200,000 plus residents affected by noise pollution, and it's clear. Heathrow isn't just stretched, it's stuck. Without a bold, coordinated rethink of the entire system, London's aviation future may just stall out completely. So, what should the UK do about its aviation crisis? Well, there are a few options, but none as bold, bizarre, or ambitious as the one once backed by former Prime Minister Boris Johnson: a floating airport on the Thames Estuary. Yes, really. Inspired by Japan's Kansai International Airport, the idea aims to bypass Heathrow's gridlock by building an entirely new aviation hub on water. But this isn't some brand new pipe dream. In fact, the concept goes back decades, to the 1970s, when Britain first started thinking beyond Heathrow. Back then, long before the current crisis, a government-appointed panel called the Roskill Commission was tasked with finding a location for London's third major airport. Their initial pick? Cublington in Buckinghamshire. But one dissenting voice, urban planner Colin Buchanan, warned of the environmental fallout. He proposed a bold alternative: Maplin Sands, near Island on the Thames Estuary. In 1971, the government approved the plan. And it wasn't just an airport, it was a vision. A 4-runway mega hub, a deep-water seaport, a city for 600,000 residents, and even new motorways, the M12 and M13, linking it all to London. Parliament passed the Maplin Development Act in 1973. Construction was set to begin. Then came the 1973 oil crisis. Fuel prices soared, economic conditions soured, projected passenger numbers dropped, and just 1 year later, in 1974, the entire dream was scrapped under financial and political pressure. A decision many now see as a colossal missed opportunity. But the idea didn't die. By the early 2000s, as congestion at Heathrow and Gatwick returned to critical levels, so did the calls to revisit the Estuary plan. This time, the charge was led by then Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, with a plan so bold it was quickly dubbed Boris Island. The goal? Relieve pressure on London's existing airports and dramatically reduce flight noise and emissions over the city. But Boris didn't design it. The vision came from two of the biggest names in architecture, Sir Norman Foster of Foster Plus Partners and the legendary Zaha Hadid architects. And if Foster sounds familiar, that's because he's behind some of the most iconic megaprojects on Earth: Wembley Stadium, the Gherkin, and the Malau Viaduct. What they proposed wasn't just an airport. It was a global gateway that could redefine the UK's role in international aviation. But as with any mega dream, the devil would be in the details. So what would this floating mega airport actually look like? Dubbed London Britannia Airport, the proposal envisioned a colossal, state-of-the-art aviation hub built on an artificial island or reclaimed land near the Isle of Grain or Shivering Sands in the Thames Estuary. We're talking 4 runways, expandable to 6, fully integrated with high-speed rail and express road links. And unlike Heathrow, this airport would allow 24-hour operations thanks to its remote location. No more flights roaring over densely packed neighborhoods. But here's the kicker. This wasn't just meant to complement Heathrow. It was designed to replace it. That's right. Under Boris Johnson's plan, Heathrow would be shut down entirely. In its place, a new eco-friendly urban zone called Heathrow Gardens, with 300,000 new homes, 200,000 jobs, and expansive green infrastructure to tackle London's housing crisis. The new airport, meanwhile, would be car-free, relying entirely on high-speed rail connections. Passengers would check in at existing hubs like Ebbsfleet, St. Pancras International, or even the Royal Docks, and travel to the island in under 20 minutes. Other access options included ferries, jetfoils, and limited vehicle routes for freight and staff. The plan was bold, futuristic, and undeniably transformative. On paper, it sounded like a dream. A greener London, a quieter skyline, up to 200 million passengers per year, more than double Heathrow's current peak. An aviation hub fit for the future. But in reality, it was nearly impossible. To start with, the estimated cost ranged between £67 billion and £123 billion. And that's just the beginning. The location? A highly protected ecological zone, teeming with wildlife, especially birds. Studies warned the project could disrupt up to 45% of the Thames Estuary Special Protection Area and nearly 40% of the Ramsar-designated wetlands. Translation? Tens of thousands of hectares of habitat compensation would be required. And even then, bird strikes, already a threat, would become a constant danger given the volume of migratory birds in the area. Then there's the fog. The Thames Estuary is notorious for thick, unpredictable fog, which would mean frequent delays, canceled flights, and major safety concerns. Not ideal for a global hub meant to run 24/7. And let's not forget the cost comparison. While the Britannia project was projected to exceed £100 billion, the Channel Tunnel cost just £20 billion, adjusted for inflation. Beijing Daxing, one of the most advanced airports in the world, was built for less. And even Kansai International, another artificial island airport, came in at a fraction of the cost. So while the vision was breathtaking, the reality was this. London Britannia Airport may have been the boldest plan in British aviation history, but it was also one of the most impractical. And if you think weather was the only hurdle, think again. Just look at this data. For over a decade, weather patterns in the Thames Estuary have shown no predictable trend, just erratic swings year after year. Flood risks, fog, and instability make the area wildly unsuitable for consistent aviation operations. But the weather was just the beginning. Even the head of UK National Air Traffic Control called this the worst possible location for an airport. Why? Because it sits dangerously close to a massive LNG facility on the Isle of Grain, a plant that stores enormous amounts of highly flammable gas. Not exactly the ideal neighbor for an international airport. And then there's the SS Richard Montgomery, a World War II-era shipwreck resting just offshore, still loaded with 1,400 tons of unexploded ordnance. That's right, a literal underwater time bomb, barely a few kilometers from the proposed site. Stack on top of that the already overloaded southeastern UK airspace, shared by Heathrow, Gatwick, Stansted, Luton, and London City. Trying to jam another mega airport into that sky would be like shoving another roundabout into the middle of the M25 during rush hour. Total chaos. And we haven't even talked about water yet. The Thames flood barrier, London's critical line of defense against rising waters, could have been affected by changes in estuary flow caused by land reclamation or construction. One miscalculation, and the capital's flood resilience might have been compromised. But perhaps the most overlooked consequence of all? The human cost. Heathrow isn't just an airport. It's an economic engine, supporting over 84,000 direct jobs and thousands more through its surrounding ecosystem of shops, logistics firms, caterers, and freight handlers. From luxury retailers and its terminals to time-sensitive supply chains handling pharmaceuticals, fashion, and fresh produce, Heathrow powers a thriving regional economy. Had the Britannia Airport gone ahead, Heathrow would have likely been shuttered or drastically scaled down, gutting West London's economic heart. Relocating operations over 70 miles away to the Thames Estuary wouldn't have been plug and play. It would have required new infrastructure, retrained workforces, renegotiated contracts, and in many cases, lost clients and market share. Even worse, retailers inside Heathrow, some of the UK's busiest, would have seen their footfall vanish overnight. This wasn't just about flights. It was about livelihoods, business ecosystems, and international trade. And here's the twist. Almost nobody wanted it. Local councils like Medway, Kent, and Southend were loudly opposed. Environmental groups like the RSPB rang alarm bells. Even major airlines like British Airways pushed back, unwilling to uproot their entire operations from Heathrow. Because Heathrow isn't just tarmac and terminal. It's a global hub, a strategic asset, and a living, breathing city of commerce. Trying to abandon it would have caused more turbulence than the UK could afford. So, what happened in the end? After weighing the mountain of costs, risks, and fierce opposition, the Airports Commission delivered its verdict. And it was a decisive no. In its 2014 report, the Commission concluded that while the Thames Estuary plan was bold, its disadvantages far outweighed the potential gains. Instead, in 2016, the government backed a far more familiar solution, expanding Heathrow with a third runway, a northwest extension aimed at increasing capacity without starting from scratch. Sounds simple, right? Well, not quite. That project has been mired in legal battles, environmental challenges, political delays, and growing public resistance. To this day, construction hasn't even started. But that's a story for another time. As for Boris Island, it remains one of the UK's most fascinating what-ifs. An ambitious idea packed with promise, but in reality, a high-stakes gamble that could have thrown the country into chaos. Still, some, including Boris Johnson himself, weren't ready to let go. He once famously declared he would lie down in front of the bulldozers if Heathrow expansion ever moved forward. Because in his eyes, scrapping Heathrow and starting fresh wasn't madness, it was vision. Whether it was genius or folly, well, that depends on how you see the future of flight in Britain. I guess the question now is, what do you think? Was Boris Island the audacious solution London needed? Or just a billion-pound fantasy that belongs at the bottom of the Thames? Let us know in the comments. Is this the future of British aviation? Or a cautionary tale in concrete and ambition? And if you're into mega projects, forgotten master plans, and the high-stakes drama behind the world's biggest builds, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and buckle up. Because we've got more jaw-dropping deep dives flying your way. Still curious? Then check out our breakdown of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. It's waiting for you right now on screen, and it's just as insane. Stay bold, stay curious, and we'll see you in our next mega adventure.